All right, y'all. So welcome back to the Black Fatherhood Legacy Podcast. My name is Jay Cortez Thomas, and today I have
Dave Huff. What's happening?
yes, sir. So today's topic, we're talking about the representation, why representation matters, why positive Black imagery matters in the context of creating a narrative or uh, uh, affecting the culture in the sense of, we always talk about that statistic of all this whole thing got started. 68% of Black homes didn't have a father. Now it's at 42.
Yeah.
So it's just the numbers dropping. Our generation is the generation that is changing it. We are being fathers. We're in the home. We're with our kids. We're being apart. We're doing all these things. And so this is more to get to why that's happening, and to further that and to keep that number dropping, we're diving into how this generation was affected in doing what we're doing today. So last week we had DJ and Dwayne. DJ and Dwayne went to Fresno State. They were buddies at Fresno State. This is funny. The whole thing was this is so funny. They were buddies at Fresno State. They met at Fresno State in the dorm. Same situation like you and me. They have the same type of relationship, everything, and they graduated. I think they said in the 2009, 2012.
Okay, so they came after us.
Yeah, they came after us, and so it's just funny just to see that whole dynamic and to see their relationship, and just so that you guys know that this is the same relationship. So the guy I was talking about on the last episode is actually here today. This is my DJ, Dave. So we're talking about Black representation matters. I know that you and I, when we got to Fresno State in the early 2000s, and we're talking about Black positive imagery as a look back into the 90s and the early 2000s. Why depicting Black fatherhood is in a positive way is so important. I really think that, when we had some examples of television, radio, media at the time, in the 90s, it was more of like Cosby Show.
Yeah.
Goodness. So there was a movie from
Like Fresh
Prince of Bel-Air, Uncle Phil.
Yeah.
We had all the WB shows, all that. Family Matters. There's a lot of Black families represented on television at that time. And in the media space, I think it was a little different because we talk about music and stuff like that. It wasn't as embraced like Black fatherhood. It was more a pimp.
Yeah,
I'm a gangster. I got 5, 6 women, this, that, and the other. And so, but I think that what affected our generation was one spoke louder than the other. Like the dad on TV, Uncle Phil spoke louder to me than, let's say, Too Short did. You know what I'm saying? Like it spoke louder to me. And one of the movies that was real influential on me, just in general, seeing positive Black imagery, I actually did a video on this on YouTube about the movie Boomerang. Boomerang was huge to me as a kid because I watched Marcus Graham, who was played by Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
He was a marketing guy, worked for this huge marketing firm. Everybody there in the positions of power were African American at that company. Everybody there was uber professional. They had nice houses, nice cars. They carried themselves well. It was like, and so that did something to me. Like when I would watch it, I was like, wow, I want to be that. Like I'm in marketing today because of Marcus Graham. I wanted to be Marcus Graham. Like I saw his swag, his suits that he wore, like the job that he did, the commercials, like he was making commercials and doing video. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be that. And his buddies, he had Martin and the guy played by David Allen Greer were his two buddies who were navigating professionalism at a high level with relationships and all of these different things. And for me, it was like, I could easily see myself being in that space as getting older with friends that are close to me, black males that are doing well for themselves, all these different things. It changed in my mind what is possible.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what positive black imagery does. It changes in the mind of the kid that's seeing it what is possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like what? So I mean, so for me that was mine. But what was yours? Like the things you kind of looked to, like in the early '90s.
With me, yes, there was the shows as far as the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Uncle Phil. Then you had Bill Cosby on the Cosby Show. Yes, there was those shows. I think because those shows allowed a huge individual, Uncle Phil, or even to with his physique, yet at the same time to be caring and nurturing and stern.
Right.
Me, I didn't grow up with a dad, but able to see somebody like me, Uncle Phil, to do the shoes, he got to be at least 6'6".
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, he could do each one of those characteristics like flawless. He could be stern when he needs to. He could be loving. He could be supporting. He could sit down and have that conversation with you, that heart to heart.
Right.
Yeah. So of course, those are things that I didn't grow up with. Yet been able to see that emotion played out on TV, that was pretty hitting. So it's like, oh, so as a kid, you watch it, you know it's out there, though you might not have it. You build those relationships with those males around you, right? If it's uncles, right? If it's neighbors, or even if it's something simple, going to the corner store. I live at a store called Miracle Market, and there was a few guys, one guy named Steve and another guy named Mike. Steve, whenever he saw me leaving high school, he would give me a ride home, but then having those conversations.
Right.
And so of course, those were the shows. It does something for you as you begin to mature. You don't realize it until you get older. And then even when it comes to other shows like the dad on Good Times, or the one guy, I think the show was called The Rock, but it was the one.
Oh yeah, Rock. Yeah.
So those two shows, those are dads were different because here it is, you have Uncle Phil, who's a lawyer, and then you have Bill Cosby, who's a doctor. And those are high class jobs.
Right.
But then you had the Good Times dad. I remember his career, but then you had the other guy who was a garbage man.
Mm-hmm.
Yet with them, it showed like, it doesn't matter what my job is. I'm going to provide for my family.
Right.
I'm going to love my family, and I'm going to stick up for my family.
Right. And in the same way you said that, like, because like Family Matters, he was a cop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you saw at every level or every socioeconomic level in the black community was a black man being a dad.
Yeah.
And so like, at that time, that's why I'm really for positive black imagery for sure when it comes to media and television, because it subconsciously is affecting you. You don't think it.
Yeah.
I did that video about Boomerang because I actually thought about it one day and I was like, oh snap, that movie really did affect me like that. Like I didn't think it did. And I saw what happened was I was watching TV one day and it came on and I was like, I forgot how much this thing influenced the heck out of me, right? And so, like, you start to see that, man, subconsciously that stuff was doing something to you as a kid that you didn't even realize it.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I remember you spoke on that movie Boomerang before, and it's like I remember you said that story before, so it's kind of funny.
Yeah, but that's crazy because I literally went into that field. I literally try to and I wouldn't say try to because it affects you subconsciously, so you don't mean for it to do that, but it affected how I even go about my professionalism, how I present myself. Like for the longest time, I did not wear suits, and I worked at a job where they were like, "Dude, you could come casual." Like it was my first marketing job, and I was like, "No, I'm wearing a suit." So I would come suited every day, and I think it was because of that movie. Like he came suited every day, right? So I just kind of figured I'm in this atmosphere. That's what I'm supposed to do, kind of thing.
And the thing is, even to jump in real quick with suited, I think something not just black fathers but black males that we have to focus on probably a little bit more than the next individual is presentation. And I remember one time I worked for my previous employer. My first time there, basically my responsibility was storage. I did in-office stuff, but most of my work required storage. Basically, I had to put away the supplies in the closet, literally on my hands and knees, putting things away. My very first day, I showed up in a certain time. And then I continued to work that way, basically because for them, they're like, oh, you're dressed up? And they're like, me, like, no, this is normal. I mean, this is presentation. and like I said, with that, presentation does matter. How you speak, how you communicate, how you carry yourself. I used to wear baggy clothes. But me, I'm a slim dude. I'm not trying to get blown away in the wind, so let me wear some clothes.
Right.
Yeah. So like all of that small stuff. So like, yes, subconsciously, it's if I'm dressing this way or if I'm carrying myself another way. For example, I would tell people, well, let me finish that part. So if I'm dressing this way or if I'm carrying myself another way, I'll get everybody the reason to stereotype my image.
Mm-hmm.
And that stereotypical image was what somebody might have seen on TV.
Right.
A drug dealer, a thug, et cetera, et cetera. But if I carry myself another way, you can stereotype me still, but you're going to stereotype me with what's positive and not what's negative. So just realize, like, the power that you do have in how you carry yourself.
Right.
And then once you get a taste of that, it's like, oh, I like this feeling.
Yeah.
Let me keep carrying myself this way.
Exactly.
And it's easy.
Exactly. And it's also the how people, when you do that, how they react to it.
Yeah,
It's like, you and I know this, like we don't get to dress down in certain atmospheres that everybody else is dressed down. Because like if I wear a hoodie in a certain place, I'm looked at it a certain way.
Yeah.
Where somebody else can wear a hoodie and they get away with it because of the color of their skin. So it's just like we understand those dynamics.
Yeah.
And also too, I think too, it's just cultural. Like we like to get fresh. Like that's just our culture as Black men. Like we like to get fresh. And so wearing those suits every day, it did something for me. I know it did something for you.
Yeah.
Like, it's right.
Yeah.
And then so I believe seeing Black imagery is not only like television, right? Like it's locally. And you were talking a lot about the gentleman that you would see at the corner store and things like that. And then last time when me and DJ and Dwayne were talking, we were talking about how kids are watching us today. When you walk out the door with Joy and your kids, people are watching you. Like they see that. Like, so you may have a young David Huff that is walking down the street and he sees you with your family. That does something. And so I was trying to tell them is like, we have to be conscious of that. And not only because there's a reason that we need to represent who we are in front of more people more often.
Sure, we do.
Because it's not always the television. It's not always movies. It's not always that. Sometimes it's just, Jay down the street, Dave up the street. Like there's going to be some kid one day that be like, man, I used to see this guy. He rode his bike. He had a family. He did this, that, and the other. And he just like really, really, I would see him and I'm like, I want to be that when I grow up. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, sometimes we don't see it because we're in it and we don't know that people are outside looking, but we have to be very mindful that that's happening because there's a lot of, other than my dad growing up, there were a lot of men around me that I would just see them and I'd be like, wow, like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to represent that. Like, I want to, I know when I was getting married, like right before I got married, Pastor Michael Smith, he was very influential in that way to me because he carried himself different than my dad did growing up. And so to see a different way that a Black man could carry himself and be a family man and do all these different things was intriguing to me. And so it was just like, I want to be that, and so you don't know who's watching you, and I think a lot of why this statistic is dropping and why more Black men are choosing to be fathers and stay in the home is not only because of television and movies, but more because of there's more Black men stepping to the plate and people are seeing that every single day. It's becoming normal.
And that's the thing. It's true. It's becoming normal. It's becoming seen more. And even within the young adults, Black young adults or whomever, it's becoming, I don't want to say it's cool, but it's becoming cool. It's like, that dude's out there playing at the park with his kids.
Right.
So, but even, there are small sayings that I've always, not always, there are sayings that I've heard while growing up where I've applied that toward my parents or even being a husband. One of them when I worked with, like, every supervisor that you have, it doesn't matter if they're good or bad, you're going to learn something from them. Every individual that you see, it doesn't matter if they're good or bad, you're going to learn something. Apply it towards parenting.
Right.
One time years back, there was one of the pastors where he was talking. He said, every decision that you make, we either add or subtract to the legacy that you leave behind. So that's applied to parenting. The other thing is, even when it comes to parenting, basically, it's like, don't beat yourself up over the little things because you're going to continue growing. Yeah, and the thing is, like, even while going out being a black father, it's like, okay, well, yes, I didn't grow up with one. Right before I got married, I talked to my uncle. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of nervous about being married because I didn't grow up with a dad. So I don't know what to expect. Or even once we have kids, what am I going to do? So he said, true, though that is the case, you are surrounded by positive individuals. So as an individual, you can pick what you want to apply to your life and your marriage and what you don't want to.
Right.
So look at those that you've been surrounded by, and that's how you grow.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with friendships. Like, so supply yourself with people that are evenly yoked. Yes, you can learn from other individuals that you may consider associates. Yet when it comes to your inner circle, make it be with those people that you're evenly yoked with. Grow and encourage each other, hold each other accountable.
Right.
So that's how you grow.
Yeah, and like I like how you say that because then it leaves it up to the individual and not to your experience.
True.
So like I didn't necessarily grow up. My dad did not. He ventured into it, but he didn't like run a business all the time. It was more he works for someone.
Yeah.
But just because I didn't grow up with it doesn't mean that I don't have people surrounding me now or coming up that I can look to as like, okay, I can run a business. I could do this, right? Because it's the same thing with fatherhood. It's like, you may not have it, but that's, I wouldn't say not an excuse, but it's more of you have an opportunity.
True. Yeah.
Because just because you haven't done something, just because you haven't seen it, doesn't mean you can't do it.
You're not capable.
Yeah. And so like, I love that because it's just, it applies to almost everything.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Black kids, young Black males in particular, that because that statistic is still at 42, they're in that predicament. But it's like, don't think just because you're in that predicament that you don't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to repeat, what you see, and because we had a lot of positive imagery, we had a lot of negative imagery around us too, that we could easily.
Yeah, that you could easily venture down. And that's the thing, like, you got the positive. Growing up, there is positive and there is a negative, but it was so easy to be influenced by the negative because you don't want to do the right thing, as they say. I'm like, oh, that dude, he's soft. He over there doing what's right. So it's easy to do the negative thing. Even freshman year in college. I'm not gonna go into details, but I mean, it's so easy to do. Like, well, looking back, what you should have been doing.
Yeah.
I just said, like, man, that was my backsliding days.
Right. Well, I mean, and two, I mean, it's like, even then, there were positives.
Yeah.
Like, if you think about, like, the crazy things that we got into, the things that we did, you look at all these men today, like all those men that we were, that was the conversation we had with Dwayne and DJ last week. They were like, can you believe the men that we went to school with, like who they are today? Yeah. And then I was like over here listening to them and I'm like, man, I'm thinking the same thing. Like all the guys that they're positive Black males in the community, they're ministers, they're running organizations, they're speakers, motivational speakers. And what I think it is we had a lot of positive things happening and going on at that time that were still influencing us.
Yeah, true.
Even though we were surrounded by bad, doing some bad, we had, and so if you don't have those positives around you, it's hard. Yeah. And so that's why I tell people, give people the option. Yeah. People go like, oh, so people grow up in, they're a product of their environment, right? You can become a product of your environment. But the more you bring other environments into that environment, gives the person a choice.
Yeah, the more you expose them.
It gives them the opportunity. Like, everybody just needs an opportunity. Information and resources are just an opportunity.
Yeah.
Like I always tell people, like, because they're like, oh, why is it that, black men and why black fathers aren't around and this and that? Like I always get those questions and stuff like that. And so like what I'm saying, I always say this, I say opportunity and access. Right? If you give people opportunities, you give them information, they can make better choices.
Yeah, true.
Right? But if that's all you see, you're going to become it.
Yeah.
So like if every day all I see is negativity, I don't see anything positive, what do you think I'm going to become?
Yeah, it's easy.
Because that's all I see. And my measure of success is diamonds, gold chains, rims, and a nice car. Whatever it took to get that, whatever I see that, and that's what I aspire to, I'm going to do, whether it's negative or positive, because that's the level of success that's in front of me. But if I see a different representation of success, there's an option.
It's like, oh, I can do that too.
Yeah, like wait, you know what I mean? Like that's possible. That's you know what I mean? But the thing is, I think a lot of it is stuff like this. We are black men who have our fathers, husbands. We've aspired to certain things. We're doing certain things, but we're giving information back. This is all information. What you guys are hearing right now is all information back to people to give them an opportunity to say, hey, I could do that. Like Dave, he just said he didn't grow up with a dad, but like I'm telling you right now, this guy is the poster child for dad. Like you look up dad in the dictionary, like, oh, there's Dave. You know what I'm saying? It's a picture of Dave next to that father. You know what I'm saying? He's a poster child for fatherhood, yet he didn't grow up with a father. But that is also why we're doing this. It tells off that positive information, imagery, all these things going out into the airwaves, into your subconscious, help you make better decisions in the future. And so your uncle, those dudes that are at the corner store, me watching Marcus Graham on TV, like these things helped shape and make me have better decisions and make better decisions in my life. And I really feel like in the 90s, we had a lot of, it was like the birth of positive black imagery. It was like there were all of a sudden all these TV shows, all of a sudden all these movies. All of a sudden in cartoons, and there was representation of black people and
everywhere,
and black families everywhere.
Yeah, but that's the thing that's missing. It's like when I watch what my daughter watches, or even like sitcom shows, we grew up with a lot of reality shows that show families, period, in general, black families, black college students doing great things, black
it's a different world,
all of that stuff. But now it's like, okay, well, that was our era. That influenced us to be who we are now. But then at the same time, it's like, all right, well, as I watch my kids grow up, the stuff that they watch on TV, there's a lot of stuff I don't let them watch because it's basically is to each his own. Something I don't allow them to watch because it can easily manipulate their thought process. So as a parent, that's when you step in and you're like, no, you can't watch this, or you let them watch it, but you sit down and you watch it with them.
Right.
Or you teach them. So that's why there's a dual responsibility to point toward the stuff that we've learned and basically how we are now as parents, as black parents. Okay, well, I look at my boy Josiah. When I see him, I know he's going to be tall. I'm 6'4". I know he's going to be big. My wife's side of the family is huge. They're like horses, pretty much. It's just solid muscle. Him being 3 years old, and already at this time, I guess it's a little bit off topic, but already at this time, I'm already praying that when he becomes older, that people see him for the gentle and caring person that
right,
he is,
right,
and that people don't get intimidated by his physique. So it's those such things. It's like, man, as a black parent, like not only do I have to raise my children the right way, it's like, man, there's things I got to be cautious of. Anaya, she's 9 years old. She's all legs, and the stuff that she wears, she wears things that are completely appropriate.
Right.
But because she's all legs, you look at her, she's tall and slim, and she looks like a model. So at the same time, it's like, oh, well, now as a black parent, it's my responsibility to show her what a good man is and how I want to treat her, how I want to talk to her, how I want to appreciate her. And then knowing that the stuff that you're investing into them, they're going to grow up and say, oh, I want somebody like my dad. Like I said, and that's the revolving door, how it continues, that's how it starts. Josiah, yes, you're going to be big and strong, but you need to be respectful because you'll always have two sisters and a mother. So that's how it continues.
Right. The Gentle Giant, when we grew up, remember that movie, was it Green Mile? Yeah, and the dude was this huge John Coffey, you know what I mean? And he was this dude, but he was a gentle giant, but his representation of how he looked, automatically, that's what got him put in prison in the first place, because he just looked the part of a person that would do a crime of that nature, right? And so we often, based on the imagery that has been put out into the media since way back then, we can remember, oftentimes can paint, I'm talking about the negative imagery, can paint a picture of Black males, our sons, whoever, as just in the wrong situation, they can look at you wrong. And it's like, that's why positive Black imagery is so important, because this is the reason why it's really important. So I grew up we moved up like the Jeffersons. I always tell people this is how my life went. I was born and we didn't have no money. We lived in like a tiny apartment, small, whatever. And as my dad's jobs and his career grew, so did our house and our cars and representation of. So I grew up around every facet of life. I grew up around the poor. I grew up around the rich, all the way up. We went up the ladder, literally. And so the nice thing about that is I got to see life from every perspective.
I get you.
Right? And so the one thing I saw when I got to the top was our neighborhood got whiter and whiter, right? But in that neighborhood, I noticed that there is a perspective bubble, right? My perspective on life is based on this bubble I live in. And a lot of these people that live, and I'm not even going to say white, I'll just say socioeconomically, the people who are more well off, they have they hang out around well off people, they live around well off people. So their whole perspective on life and social issues and everything is based on everybody who agrees with them in that circle, because they don't have people outside of that box. The problem with that is now that anybody who's outside of that box looks like something else. So like if I see on television this rapper who was wearing a hoodie, jeans, and some Air Forces, I associate that with a thug. But I like Air Forces. I like jeans. I like want to wear some hoodies sometimes. So if I'm walking through a neighborhood, I may be looked at as, oh, that's one of those thugs like I saw on TV, but I'm not. It's just that in their bubble, that's not represented. So they don't know you as your name, that's Jay. They know you as that's one of them. Right? And so my thing is positive Black imagery is important also for those people who are outside of our circles. Because they get to see a different walk of life, and they get to see it in a different. They're exposed to more, and so now it's like, well, I just want to get to know that guy. Maybe he's not like that, right? And so there are less prejudging. There's less prejudice that happens when people are exposed.
True. And that's the thing is, like, those assumptions, those stereotypes will be there. We cannot control that. But just as you mentioned, like, with the percentage dropping from low 70s up to now, like, mid 40s, with that percentage dropping, it's also changing the narrative, the stereotypes, it's making them lesser. Folks will always have their thoughts, but at the same time, like I said, now it's a revolving door that what our generation is doing, we're now going to make an impact on our children to where that percentage should drop even more. So yes, the stereotypes always be there, but all we can do is basically apply what we've learned, instill it in our children, even let the younger know, so high schoolers know that may be growing up with a single parent now. It's like, no, it's okay.
Right.
You don't always have to get the quick dollar. Things that are easily earned are quickly lost. There's nothing wrong with working hard. There's nothing wrong with just being with one woman. Yes, we've been there, done that, but as you mature, you get older, like, these are the things you should focus on. These are the decisions you should start making. Every decision you make, as I mentioned, either add or subtract. It's like I said, so what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Mm-hmm.
And I know even I tell my wife, when it comes to living in the house, growing up in Compton, my name neighborhood. It was a cool neighborhood, but there are some things I'd rather not have on my checklist when it comes to living somewhere. But I told my wife, like, no, wherever we live, I want to live somewhere that's walking distance to a liquor store or a convenience store, because walking distance, those are some of the best conversations I could be at. The other day, earlier, I was basically going to the store, Josiah. We went to the gas station to get a bag of chips and Slurpee because it was just me and him. Yet as we went, there was one person who was letting us cross at the crosswalk. I didn't think nothing of it. I'm just crossing with them. They honked their horn at us and they gave us a thumbs up. I'm like, it's not, to me, it's nothing.
Right,
I guess there's that stereotype, that assumption, like, oh, you're doing a good job. Yes, the other person honking the horn is a Caucasian man, was like, dude, it's just me being a parent.
Yeah.
But then I looked across the way and I see another black woman, and she looks at me and smiles. So it's that stuff. And even when I got to Slurp and I came back, he's on my shoulders. You see another person waving, another Caucasian family. I look back, I see another black dude. He gives me those nods. So it's those things. So like I said, it's changing.
Yes, and you're the real representation of, not the media representation there.
Yeah.
And so like that's a prime example of what I was talking about, where people are watching.
Yeah.
And so now that white guy that saw you away and gave you that, now that puts something different in his mind about black fathers.
Yeah.
To that lady across the street, that puts something different in her mind about black fathers. The black dudes, they all are now seeing that, and just for that one moment, or maybe even for a lifetime, they're now affected by what they saw.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, true.
And so there's so much when it comes to black imagery. We're talking about positive black imagery. We're going to get back to you guys on episode 4 with a little bit more. This is the Black Fatherhood Legacy Podcast. This is Jay Cortez. We'll be back again with Dave Huff right after